They weren't shelling out $30 an hour for kicks. That's what I kept reminding myself as I steered my beat-up Civic into the gravel parking lot of Coyote Fuel and Go. The headlights cut across the weathered sign, the neon coyote sputtering like it was wrestling with the decision to stay illuminated or give in to the encroaching darkness. The station stood starkly alone on Highway 160, a solitary sentinel in the vast, desolate expanse of the Navajo Nation. Red rock mesas rose in the distance, their silhouettes barely discernible against the inky canvas of the night sky. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the tick-tick-tick of the cooling metal. The desert night pressed in on the windows, a living, breathing entity. Out here, 30 miles from the nearest speck of civilization, darkness possessed a palpable weight, a tangible substance. My phone buzzed. "Danny, hey little brother?" I answered, forcing a cheerful tone. "Miguel Reyes, you at work?" His voice sounded clearer than it had in months. Rehab seemed to be working wonders. "Just got here. First night. How you holding up?" "Better. Group therapy today talked about, the stuff with the car." My stomach clenched. "Danny, no, it's good. I'm owning that's what they say here." He paused. "You didn't have to take this job, Miguel Reyes. Not for me." I watched a moth hurl itself against the harsh fluorescent lights above the gas pumps. "It's good money. Besides, how hard can it be to run a register and watch people pump gas in the middle of nowhere at night?" Danny's laugh sounded strained, brittle. "Just be careful, okay? Always am. Talk tomorrow." After hanging up, I grabbed my backpack and stepped out into the night. The air hung thick with the scent of dust and gasoline, underpinned by something else, something metallic and subtly unsettling. Heat still radiated from the asphalt despite the late hour. August in Arizona never truly relented, merely becoming slightly less brutal after sunset. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. The interior was precisely what you'd expect. Linoleum floors worn smooth and thin by decades of trudging boots, shelves crammed with beef jerky and energy drinks, a coffee station that had clearly witnessed better days. A dusty boom box on the counter emitted classic rock at a volume that was more atmospheric texture than distinct sound. "You must be Miguel Reyes." I turned to find Hank Yazzie emerging from the back room. Hank Yazzie looked precisely as his voice had suggested on the phone. Weathered, substantial, with deep creases etched around his eyes that hinted at a lifetime spent squinting into the harsh desert sun. His silver hair was pulled back in a short ponytail, and turquoise stones gleamed at his wrists. "Call me Miguel Reyes," I said, extending my hand. His grip was dry and firm. "Hank Yazzie, owner, manager, and sometimes janitor," he gestured around the sparse interior. "Welcome to Coyote Fuel and Go. Not much to look at, but it keeps the lights on. Thanks for the opportunity. Not many places hiring at this wage." Something flickered across Hank Yazzie's face, too fleeting to decipher. "Well, night shift's not for everyone. Last 3 guys quit within a week." "Their loss," I said, injecting more confidence into my voice than I actually felt. Hank Yazzie nodded toward the bulletproof booth behind the register. "You'll work from in there. Door locks automatically at 10 p.m. After that, all transactions happen through the drawer." The booth appeared to be a relic from another era, its glass surface webbed with a network of fine cracks. A stool, register, and small desk fan occupied the cramped space. Not exactly luxurious, but it would serve its purpose. "Training's pretty straightforward," Hank Yazzie continued, leading me behind the counter. "Register's old but reliable. Gas pumps need to be authorized from here." He pointed to a panel of switches. "Security cameras cover the pumps and store. Panic button under the counter calls the tribal police, but they're about 40 minutes out. So, don't panic." I offered a weak smile. He didn't reciprocate. "There are rules here, Miguel Reyes. Important ones." I nodded, suddenly acutely aware of the gravity in his voice. "First, never sell jerky, tobacco, or Slim Jims to anyone with yellow eyes." I braced myself for the punchline, but it didn't come. "Yellow eyes," I repeated, confusion clouding my features. "Like jaundice. You'll know it when you see it." Hank Yazzy's expression remained utterly devoid of humor. Second, if the pumps start leaking black fluid, not gas, something darker, lock the doors immediately and play track 3 on that boombox. Don't stop it until the leaking stops. I glanced at the ancient cassette player. What's on track 3? A chant. Old Navajo prayer. He waved away my question, dismissing it as inconsequential. And third, most important, never answer the payphone. He pointed to a faded blue payphone mounted on the wall near the bathrooms. It looked like it hadn't been touched since the 90s. Does it even work? I asked, skepticism lacing my tone. It shouldn't, Hank Yazzie said flatly, his gaze unwavering. Any questions? A dozen. But something in his expression warned me against voicing them. No, sir. No jerky for yellow eyes. Play track 3 for black leaks. Ignore the phone. Got it. He studied me for a moment, his eyes piercing, then nodded slowly. Good. I'll be back at dawn to relieve you. Emergency numbers are by the register. Cell service is spotty out here, so don't count on it. After a cursory tour of the stockroom and bathroom, Hank Yazzie headed for the door. He paused with his hand on the frame, his gaze lingering. One more thing, Miguel Reyes. Between 2 and 4 a.m., things can get strange. Just follow the rules and you'll be fine. Before I could press him for clarification, he was gone, the bell jingling in his wake, the sound swallowed by the vastness of the night. Through the windows, I watched his pickup disappear down the highway, its tail lights swallowed by the oppressive darkness. And just like that, I was alone, the sole inhabitant of this isolated outpost. The first few hours passed without incident. I familiarized myself with the register, meticulously organized the candy rack, and scrolled through my phone until the signal finally succumbed to the desolate landscape. By midnight, I'd served exactly 2 customers. A local woman purchasing cigarettes and a bleary-eyed college kid filling up his tank en route to Flagstaff. At 1:30 a.m., the bell jingled, announcing the arrival of another soul. A trucker, built like a refrigerator, lumbered in, his presence filling the small space. His arms were canvases of faded ink, adorned with tattoos that told forgotten stories. A rattlesnake, its diamond pattern blurred with age, coiled around his forearm, disappearing beneath the cuff of his worn sleeve. Evening, I called out from behind the counter. He responded with a grunt, a sound like rocks grinding together, and shuffled toward the refrigerated drinks. As he bent to retrieve a red bowl, something flickered at the edge of my vision. His shadow, cast against the wall, seemed distorted, unnaturally elongated, with bizarre protrusions from the head that resembled antlers. I blinked hard, and the anomaly vanished, the shadow returning to normal. The trucker lumbered to the counter, placing the energy drink and a disposable lighter on the worn surface. "Pump 4, he rasped, sliding 2 $20 bills across to me. As I rang up the sale, a strange odor assaulted my nostrils. A musty scent of wet fur mingled with the acrid tang of something burnt. I forced myself to breathe through my mouth. "Long haul?" I asked, attempting to make conversation and distract myself from the unsettling smell. "Always," he replied, his voice a blend of gravel and cigarette smoke. "You're new here." It wasn't a question, but a statement. "First night," I confirmed. He pocketed his change without bothering to count it. "Won't be many," he muttered ominously. Before I could formulate a response, he turned and walked out of the store. Through the large window, I watched him methodically fuel his semi-truck, his movements stiff and almost mechanical. When he finished, he paused, staring directly at the store for a long, unnerving moment before climbing into the cab and driving away. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The digital clock on the register blinked to 2 a.m. "Things can get strange," Hank had warned. I shook my head, trying to dislodge the creeping unease that had settled at the base of my skull. Just road fatigue and poor lighting playing tricks on my eyes, I told myself. Nothing more. The bell above the door jingled again. A woman stood in the doorway, her white sundress stark against the dim fluorescent light. She moved with a peculiar, gliding step toward the jerky display, her back toward me. Dark, ominous stains mottled the fabric of her dress, oil, perhaps, or something far more sinister. "Can I help you find something?" I asked, my voice sounding weak and reedy in the otherwise silent store. She turned slowly, deliberately. Her face was ordinary enough, middle-aged, with lines etched around her eyes and mouth, but something in her gaze sent a shiver down my spine. She approached the counter, holding a package of beef jerky. "Just this?" she said, her voice surprisingly melodic, as she slid the jerky toward me. Our fingers brushed for a fleeting second. I caught a faint whiff of something rotten, almost like decaying meat, lurking beneath a cloying, flowery perfume. When I looked up to tell her the price, the words died in my throat, unuttered. Her eyes had changed, the irises dilated, consuming the whites, glowing with a jaundiced yellow light in the harsh fluorescent glare. Hank's first rule thundered in my head, echoing in my mind. "I'm sorry," I stammered, my mouth suddenly dry as desert sand. "We're out of jerky." Her lips curled back, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too numerous, too predatory. "Don't lie to me, boy," she hissed. "Store policy," I managed to choke out. "I can't sell this to you." The yellow in her eyes flared, intensified. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought she might try to break through the protective glass. Instead, she leaned closer, her foul breath fogging the partition between us. "You'll starve them," she hissed, the words dripping with malice. Then she was gone, the cheerful jingle of the bell marking her exit with a sound that felt obscene and jarring after what I just witnessed. I sat frozen on my stool, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Outside, the pumps stood silent and ominous under the buzzing lights, with no sign of the woman or any vehicle. Had I imagined it all? The yellow eyes, the teeth, the overwhelming wrongness of her presence? I rubbed my face hard, pressing until I saw spots of light dancing behind my eyelids. Sleep deprivation had to be the explanation. I'd been working overtime at the garage before quitting to take this job, running on fumes for weeks. To steady myself, I began counting the register, the familiar ritual of sorting bills and coins a calming balm to my frayed nerves. When I pulled out the till to check for larger bills hidden underneath, something caught my eye, the corner of a photograph. I tugged it free. It was a Polaroid, faded with age and handling. It showed Hank, looking much younger, standing beside something that made my stomach churn with revulsion. The figure was humanoid but fundamentally wrong, too tall, too thin, its skin hanging loosely, as if it were several sizes too large. Its face was blurred, either by motion or by deliberate smudging, rendering it unidentifiable. Written at the bottom in faded blue ink, "Feeding time, 1999. I flipped the Polaroid over, hoping for some explanation, but the back was blank. The boombox switched songs, the opening notes of "Don't Fear the Reaper," filling the silence with an unsettling irony. I quickly tucked the photo into my pocket, suddenly certain I wasn't meant to have seen it. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under a sky full of stars that seemed too bright, too close, too watchful. For the first time, I noticed how the shadows pooled unnaturally around the base of the pumps, how the air seemed to shimmer and waver above them like heat mirages despite the cooling night air. I checked the time, 2:33 a.m. "Things can get strange," Hank had said. I still had a long way to go until dawn. "The desert doesn't forget," my old Navajo grandmother used to say that back when I was small enough to sit on her lap. The desert remembers every footprint, every drop of blood, every secret whispered into its sands. I never truly understood what she meant until that night at Coyote Fuel and Go, when the darkness pressed against the windows like a living thing, hungry and patient. After finding the Polaroid, I couldn't settle as I felt on edge. I paced the small store, straightening items that didn't need straightening, wiping counters that were already clean, doing anything to keep moving, to push back against the oppressive stillness that had fallen over the station like a shroud. The clock read 3:17 a.m. when the payphone rang. The sound cut through Blue Oyster Cult like a knife through butter, sharp and insistent, demanding attention. I froze mid-step, a bag of chips suspended between shelf and hand, my heart skipping a beat. The phone shouldn't be working. That's what Hank had implied, if not stated outright. And his third rule echoed in my head, a stark warning: never answer the payphone. It rang again, the bell inside it sounding somehow wet and distorted, as if the mechanism were coated in something thick and viscous. I set down the chips and approached it slowly, cautiously. The blue plastic housing was covered in a fine layer of dust, seemingly undisturbed for years, yet it rang, vibrating slightly with an unnatural energy. The shrill ringing intensified with each call. The phone. I stood before it, close enough to reach out and touch. No one knew I was here, save for Hank, Yazzie, and Danny. Couldn't possibly be for me. Yet, my hand moved with a will of its own, reaching for the receiver. Hank Yazzie's rules screamed in my mind, but a deeper, more insidious curiosity shoved them aside. What harm could a simple phone call do? I lifted the receiver to my ear. At first, only static, the kind that sets your teeth on edge and makes your fillings ache. Then, beneath the crackling interference, a voice, female, elderly, speaking as if through gallons of water. "They're using you," it rasped, the words barely discernible through the static. "The pumps aren't for gas." "Who is this?" I asked, my own voice sounding alien to my ears. More static, rising and falling like the relentless waves of the ocean. Then, "Hank Yazzie knows. Ask about his wife." "What about his wife? Who are you?" The static surged, a deafening roar that forced me to jerk the receiver away from my ear. When I cautiously brought it back, the voice had changed, now sounding like a child, high and sing-song. "Miguel Reyes stole a car. Miguel Reyes broke the law. Miguel Reyes left his brother to fall." My blood turned to ice water. No one here knew about that, no one except Danny. I slammed the receiver down, my hand trembling uncontrollably. The phone immediately began ringing again, its shrill tone relentless. I backed away, bumping into a rack of chips that clattered loudly to the floor. The ringing continued, relentless and unforgiving, as I retreated to the perceived safety of the booth. 5 rings, 10, 20, then a sudden, jarring silence, so abrupt it felt like a physical pressure against my eardrums. Outside, the lights above the pumps flickered erratically, casting momentary, dancing shadows across the cracked concrete. One of the shadows seemed to detach itself, moving independently, sliding along the ground like spilled oil before disappearing beneath pump number 4. I rubbed my tired eyes, trying to clear my head. Lack of sleep had to be the culprit. I'd been working double shifts at the garage for weeks before taking this desolate job, trying desperately to save up enough money for Danny's rehab. My exhausted mind was undoubtedly playing tricks on me. My phone buzzed weakly in my pocket, a text from Danny that had somehow managed to slip through the spotty service. "Having weird dreams. Mom's voice coming from a coyote. Says you're lying about something. You okay?" I stared at the message, a cold chill spreading rapidly through my chest. Our mother had been dead for 6 long years, and I'd never told Danny the whole, unvarnished truth about the car I'd stolen. That I'd done it to pay off his dealer when Danny was too strung out to handle it himself. That I'd willingly taken the fall because he was already on probation and would have inevitably gone to prison. Before I could even begin to respond, my phone died completely, the screen going utterly black despite being nearly fully charged only moments before. The booth suddenly felt suffocatingly small, the air oppressively thick and heavy. I needed to move to escape the stifling confines. I stepped out cautiously, scanning the deserted store, my senses on high alert. Nothing had overtly changed, yet everything felt profoundly different, imbued with an unsettling undercurrent of dread. The shadows seemed deeper, more menacing, the silence more complete and absolute. Even the boom box had fallen silent, though I hadn't consciously touched it. I made my way slowly to the front windows, peering anxiously out at the desolate night. The highway stretched empty in both directions, a seemingly endless black ribbon cutting through the even darker, more forbidding terrain. No cars, no lights, nothing but the vast, oppressive emptiness of the reservation at night. Something moved at the very edge of my vision, a fleeting glimpse of something unnatural. I turned quickly, my heart pounding in my chest, but the parking lot was empty, just the silent pumps standing like watchful sentinels under the buzzing, flickering fluorescence. I was about to dismiss it as fatigue-induced paranoia when I noticed it. A dark, viscous liquid seeping slowly from the base of pump number 4, spreading across the concrete in a widening, ominous pool. Not gasoline, something far darker, far more sinister. Hank Yazzi's second rule crashed violently into my consciousness. If the pumps leak black fluid, lock the doors and play track 3. I scrambled frantically back to the booth, fumbling clumsily with the door lock controls, my hands slick with nervous sweat. The electronic locks engaged with a heavy, resounding thunk that reverberated through the unervingly empty store. Then I moved with desperate urgency to the boom box, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I pressed the eject button. The cassette inside was unlabeled, the plastic case yellowed and brittle with age and neglect. I pushed it back in and hit play, then fast-forwarded with increasing anxiety to track 3. What emerged from the speakers wasn't music. It was a chant, low and rhythmic, in what I assumed was Navajo, though I couldn't be certain. The voice was male, elderly, repeating the same cryptic phrases over and over with steadily increasing urgency and intensity. Beneath the hypnotic voice was another, more disturbing sound, a constant, subtle scraping, like bone grinding against stone. I returned cautiously to the window, my eyes wide with a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. The black fluid had abruptly stopped spreading, but now it was moving in an even more unsettling manner, contracting and expanding rhythmically like something breathing, something alive. As the chant continued, the fluid began to retreat, pulling back inexorably toward the pump in defiance of gravity, flowing upward until it disappeared completely into the metal seams. The final, haunting notes of the chant faded slowly away, leaving behind a silence that felt expectant, charged with an unseen energy, as if the store itself were holding its breath in anticipation. I ejected the tape with trembling fingers and returned it carefully to its worn case. What the hell had I just witnessed? The rest of the long, harrowing night passed in a blur of hypervigilance and mounting dread. I jumped nervously at every sound. The ice machine's rhythmic cycling, the refrigerator's low, constant humming, the occasional distant howl that might have been the wind or, more disturbingly, might have been something else entirely, something far more sinister. No more customers came, and for that I was immensely grateful. Dawn finally arrived like a much-needed reprieve, pale, ethereal light seeping slowly across the horizon, illuminating the distant, red mesas. I'd never been so relieved to see the life-giving sun. The rumble of an approaching vehicle drew my immediate attention. Hank Yazzi's battered pickup truck pulled slowly into the lot, a cloud of dust billowing behind it. He looked utterly unsurprised to find the doors locked, waiting patiently as I disengaged the security system with trembling hands. "How was your first night?" he asked casually as he entered, his piercing eyes scanning my pale face intently. "Quiet?" I lied, unwilling and not yet ready to reveal the full extent of what I'd experienced, the sheer terror that still gripped me. "Just a couple of customers." He nodded slowly, seemingly satisfied with my terse answer. "Till gets counted at shift change. You can head out once we're done." As we counted the register, I debated whether to mention the phone call or the leaking pump. Something held me back, a nagging suspicion that Hank Yazzi already knew, that these rules of his weren't precautions but expectations. "Found something interesting last night," I said instead, pulling out the Polaroid. "Fell out when I was checking the register." Hank Yazzi's expression didn't change, but his hand, reaching for the photo, hesitated almost imperceptibly. "Old Halloween photo," he said, taking it from me. "Me and a buddy dressed up. Must have been 20 years ago now. The caption says, 'Feeding time.' Just a joke." He tucked the photo into his shirt pocket. "Old Halloween, you know. Spooky stuff." His explanation made sense, yet something in his tone rang false. Before I could press further, he pulled an envelope from his back pocket. "Almost forgot," Bonus for completing your first night. He handed it to me. Inside was a $100 bill. We give these out for the first week. Helps with retention. The money felt like a bribe, though for what, I couldn't say. Still, I thought of Danny, of the rehab center's monthly fee, and pocketed the envelope. Thanks. See you tonight. Hank Yazzie nodded. Same time. Oh, and Miggs. He paused, his dark eyes unreadable. If you used the bathroom last night, did you notice anything unusual in the mirror? Maybe? The question caught me off guard. No. Should I have? He held my gaze a moment longer, then shook his head. No, just checking. Some of the previous guys complained about the lighting in there, said it played tricks. Outside, the morning was already warming, the air shimmering above the asphalt. I sat in my car, key in the ignition, but didn't start it immediately. Instead, I pulled out my phone, now working again, and searched Skinwalker Navajo Legend. The results made my stomach clench. Shapeshifters, old Navajo witches who could take animal form, yellow eyes, unnatural movements, the ability to mimic voices of loved ones. I thought of the woman in the sundress, her eyes changing color, the trucker's shadow with its antler-like protrusions, the voice on the phone that knew things it shouldn't. Most disturbing were the accounts of skinwalkers' preferred hunting grounds. Isolated places, crossroads, areas where the boundary between worlds grew thin, places exactly like Coyote Fuel and Go. I started the car, suddenly eager to put distance between myself and the station. As I pulled onto the highway, I glanced in my rearview mirror. For just a moment, I thought I saw something standing by pump number 4, a tall, thin figure watching me leave. I blinked, and it was gone. At home, I collapsed into bed without showering, exhaustion finally overtaking anxiety. My dreams were fragmented, uneasy. Red sand shifting beneath my feet, yellow eyes watching from darkness, Danny's voice calling from somewhere I couldn't reach. I woke to my phone ringing, the clock reading 4:17 p.m. Miguel Reyes. You there? Danny's voice was tense. Yeah, just woke up. I rubbed my face, trying to clear the fog of sleep. You okay? Had another dream. The same one, but worse. Mom was... She wasn't right, Miguel Reyes. Her face kept changing. She said you were in danger, that you were feeding something that shouldn't be fed. A chill ran through me despite the afternoon heat. It's just a dream, Danny. The meds they give you there can cause weird dreams, maybe. He didn't sound convinced. Just be careful, okay? That job. Something feels off about it. After we hung up, I lay staring at the ceiling, Danny's words echoing in my mind. Something feels off about it. He had no idea how right he was. The smart thing would be to quit, call Hank Yazzie, make up an excuse, never go back to that place with its strange rules and leaking pumps and impossible phone calls. But the reality of my situation hadn't changed. Danny's rehab wasn't cheap, my savings were nearly depleted, and jobs paying $30 an hour didn't come along every day, especially for ex-cons with nothing but mechanic skills and a GED. I thought of the $100 bonus in my pocket. 7 nights of this, 7 bonuses plus the hourly wage. It would be enough to cover next month's rehab payment with some left over. I could handle 6 more nights. Whatever was happening at Coyote Fuel and Go, whatever games Hank Yazzie was playing, I just needed to follow the rules and keep my head down. The desert doesn't forget, my grandmother used to say, but I wasn't part of this desert, this land with its ancient spirits and hungry shadows. I was just passing through, collecting a paycheck. At least, that's what I told myself as I prepared for my second night at Coyote Fuel and Go, where the pumps leaked darkness and the payphone rang with impossible voices. I was wrong, of course, so terribly wrong. You're the offering. The words came to me unbidden as I pulled into the Coyote Fuel and Go for my 7th night, my last shift. I'd made it through 6 nights of increasing strangeness, collecting my bonus each morning, saying nothing to Hank Yazzie about the yellow-eyed customers or the moving shadows or the payphone that shouldn't work but did. Tonight would be different. I could feel it in the air, electric, charged, like the moments before a monsoon breaks. The sky above was clear, stars scattered across the darkness like salt on black velvet, but something was gathering, waiting. Hank Yazzy's truck was already there when I arrived, unusual for our shift change. The station looked different somehow, the lights above the pumps dimmer, their glow not quite reaching the edges of the concrete island. The windows reflected nothing, black squares in the cinder block walls. Even the neon coyote on the sign had gone dark, though the open 24 hours, beneath it still buzzed with sickly fluorescent life. I grabbed my backpack and stepped out into the night. The air felt thick. The air itself felt resistant, like I was trying to wade through invisible syrup. Each step I took toward the door demanded more effort than it logically should have. The bell, normally a cheerful jingle, remained motionless above the entrance as I pushed through. I felt the sudden rush of displaced air as the door swung shut behind me. "Hank Yazzie," I called out. No answer echoed back. The store was deserted, the familiar hum of the refrigerators and freezers conspicuously absent from the soundscape. The only sound was the gentle tick of the analog clock positioned above the cash register. I moved warily in the direction of the back booth, my footsteps echoing softly on the worn linoleum floor. The security monitor displayed nothing but static, instead of the usual grainy footage of the gas pumps and parking lot. "Hank Yazzie," I tried again, my voice a little louder this time. "In the back, Miguel Reyes." His voice sounded off, stretched and thin, like taffy pulled to its breaking point. The stockroom door stood slightly ajar, revealing only a sliver of darkness beyond. As I drew closer, a smell assaulted me, a metallic and organic scent, like raw meat left out in the sun for far too long. I pushed the door open wider. Hank Yazzie stood with his back to me, hunched over something on the metal table that normally held cleaning supplies. His silver hair was loose around his shoulders, longer than I remembered it being. His arms moved in slow, rhythmic motions, almost as if he were kneading dough. "Hank Yazzie, is everything okay?" He turned slowly to face me. His face was the same weathered landscape I knew so well, lined, with eyes deep set beneath heavy brows. But his expression was something completely foreign to me. A raw, naked, primal hunger. "Right on time," he said, and his voice was his own once more. "I was beginning to worry you might not show up." "What's going on here?" I asked, taking an involuntary step backward. "Where's the cash for the register?" "Won't be needing it tonight," Hank Yazzie said. He wiped his hands on a rag, leaving dark smears that I didn't want to identify. "No customers coming. Not the usual kind, anyway." I glanced at what lay on the table behind him. A clay figurine, roughly shaped like a coyote, its surface covered in strange symbols I didn't recognize. Beside it, a knife with a bone handle, its blade coated in something dark and viscous. "What is that?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "Protection," Hank Yazzie said simply. "And invitation." He moved toward me with surprising speed for a man his age. Before I could react, he had grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "I've been watching you, Miguel Reyes. You're perfect. Strong heart, strong will." His eyes gleamed strangely in the dim light. "The others weren't right, too weak, too scared. But you answered the phone, you saw the woman with yellow eyes and didn't run. You played the chant when the pumps bled." I tried to pull my arm away, but his fingers only tightened their grip. "Let go of me, Hank Yazzie. Can't do that. Not tonight." He began pulling me toward the back door, the one I'd never actually seen used. "It's the 7th night. Feeding time." I dug in my heels, but the floor seemed to tilt beneath me, aiding his efforts. The back door swung open of its own accord, revealing not a parking lot or alley, but a stretch of desert bathed in the cold light of the moon. Impossible! The stockroom backed up to a storage shed, not wide open land. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, real fear blooming in my chest. "The real coyote fuel," Hank Yazzie said, dragging me through the doorway. "What's been here long before the gas station, before the highway, before any of us?" The desert night enveloped us completely. We stood in a circular clearing surrounded by red rock formations that I didn't recognize, even though I'd driven this stretch of highway dozens of times. In the center of the clearing stood 4 metal poles, arranged in a square, each one identical to the gas pumps out front but stripped of their modern casing. They were ancient things, their surfaces covered in the same symbols as the clay coyote, metal so old it had developed a patina that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This isn't real," I said, my voice sounding small and insignificant in the vast space. "More real than anything you've ever known," Hank Yazzie continued, pulling me relentlessly toward the pumps. "The station is just camouflage, has been since my grandfather's time. The pumps don't dispense gas, Miguel Reyes. They take energy, life force, soul, whatever you want to call it. They keep them fed, keep them dormant." "Keep what dormant?" As if in direct answer to my question, a howl rose from beyond the rock formations, not quite a coyote or a wolf, but something that mimicked their call through a throat clearly not designed for it. Another howl joined it, then another, until the night was filled with their unholy chorus. "Skinwalkers?" I whispered, the research I'd done suddenly flooding back to me in a rush of stark terror. Hank Yazzie nodded slowly. "This land was theirs once, sacred ground, burial place for their kind. My ancestors made a deal. We provide regular offerings, and they leave the people alone." We had reached the pumps. Up close, I could see that they weren't metal at all, but bone, massive ancient bones shaped into pillars, the symbols carved deep into their yellowed surface. "The station sits on their burial ground," Hank Yazzie continued, producing a length of chain from his pocket. "The pumps siphon travelers' blood, their essence, small amounts from many people, taken as they fill their tanks. Enough to keep the skinwalkers satisfied. But not anymore," I guessed, struggling against him as he began wrapping the chain around my wrist, securing it tightly to one of the bone pumps. "The modern world," Hank Yazzie spat out the words. "Credit card readers at the pump, people paying at the terminal, never even coming inside, fewer travelers stopping at all." He secured my other wrist. "The skinwalkers grow hungry. The small offerings aren't enough anymore. They want to feast." The chains felt impossibly cold against my skin, burning like dry ice. I pulled against them with all my strength, but they held fast. "Why me?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Why not use yourself as your precious offering?" Hank Yazzie's expression shifted to something that almost resembled pity. "It doesn't work that way. My bloodline is bound to them as keepers, not all." He secured my other wrist. "The skinwalkers grow hungry. The small offerings aren't enough anymore. They want to feast." The chains felt impossibly cold against my skin, burning like dry ice. I pulled against them with all my strength, but they held fast. "Why me?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Why not use yourself as your precious offering?" Hank Yazzie's expression shifted to something that almost resembled pity. "It doesn't work that way. My bloodline is bound to them as keepers, not food. Besides," he added, stepping back to survey his work, "they're hungry for young blood, strong blood. They're hungry for you, Miggs." "You're insane?" I spat, still struggling against the chains. "They're hungry," Hank repeated, as if I hadn't spoken. "Your brother's too weak. I considered him first, when he applied for the job, but the drugs had thinned his blood, made him unsuitable. You, though," he reached out to pat my cheek, a grotesque parody of affection. "You're the strong heart they need." A cold realization washed over me. "You were going to take Danny. That's why you called me when he missed the interview." Hank shrugged. "The skinwalkers led me to your family. They have a way of finding what they need." The howls were closer now, accompanied by the soft padding of feet on sand. Shadows moved at the edge of the clearing, elongated and wrong, their proportions shifting as they circled. "You don't have to do this," I said, desperation making my voice crack. "Whatever deal your ancestors made, it's not your burden anymore. Let me go, and we'll both leave this place, never come back." Hank shook his head. "The desert doesn't forget, Miggs, and it doesn't forgive." He began backing away toward the door that still, impossibly, stood open to the stockroom. "I'm sorry. If it helps, your sacrifice will save many others. The skinwalkers will sleep again, satisfied." "Hank!" I shouted, but he had already retreated through the door. It swung shut behind him, vanishing completely and leaving only unbroken rock face where it had been. I was alone in the clearing with the bone pumps and the approaching shadows. Burn it all. The words surfaced in my mind with startling clarity as I stared at Hank Yazzie through the truck's window. His weathered face was calm, patient, as if he had all the time in the world. Behind him, yellow eyes floated in the darkness like malevolent fireflies, watching, waiting. I had one advantage Hank Yazzie didn't know about, one secret I'd kept during my week at Coyote Fuel and Go. I was a mechanic before I was anything else. While Hank Yazzie spoke, his voice a dull murmur through the glass. My hands slid beneath the seat, fingers searching for what I knew would be there. Every truck driver keeps basic tools in their vehicle. Hank Yazzie, meticulous as he was about his station, wouldn't be different. My fingers closed around cold metal, a tire iron. "You need to accept this, Miggs," Hank Yazzie was saying, his breath fogging the window between us. "The skinwalkers have chosen you. Fighting only makes it worse." I kept my expression neutral, my movements unhurried as I pulled the tire iron into my lap, concealing it with my forearm. "If I come with you," I said, loud enough for him to hear through the glass. "What happens to Danny?" A flicker of surprise crossed Hank Yazzie's face. "Your brother?" "Nothing. This was never about him. You said you considered him first, that the skinwalkers led you to my family." Hank Yazzie nodded. "They have a sense for suitable vessels, but once they tasted your essence through the pumps, they lost interest in him. You're the strong heart they need." I leaned closer to the window, as if considering his words. "And if I refuse? If I don't come willingly? Then they take you anyway," Hank Yazzie said simply. "But they'll be angry, hungry. They might seek out Danny after all, to punish your defiance." The threat ignited something in me. A cold, focused rage that cleared my head like nothing else could. I nodded slowly, making a show of resignation. "Open the door, Miggs," Hank Yazzie said, his voice gentler now. "It'll be over quickly, I promise." I reached for the door handle with my left hand. With my right, I gripped the tire iron. The door swung open. Before Hank Yazzie could react, I swung the tire iron with every ounce of strength I possessed, connecting with his temple. The impact made a sound like a melon splitting. Hank Yazzie crumpled without a sound. The skinwalkers reacted instantly, their howls rising into the night as they surged forward. I slammed the door shut, but not before I'd grabbed Hank Yazzie's key ring from his belt. Among the keys was a small object, a clay token shaped like a coyote, identical to the one I'd seen on the table in the stockroom. I didn't have time to wonder about its significance. The skinwalkers were on the truck now, their bodies slamming against the metal with enough force to rock the vehicle. Claws scrabbled at the windows, leaving frost-like patterns in their wake. One had climbed onto the roof, its distorted face appearing upside down in the windshield, yellow eyes blazing with hunger and rage. I jammed the key into the ignition, praying that whatever had killed the engine wasn't mechanical. The starter clicked weakly, the battery nearly drained. "Come on," I muttered, trying again. Click. Nothing. A spiderweb crack appeared in the passenger window as something struck it with tremendous force. Another hit and the glass would give way. I tried the ignition one more time, pumping the gas pedal, though I knew it wouldn't help with a fuel-injected engine. The starter whined, then caught. The engine roared to life. I didn't hesitate. I threw the truck into drive and stomped on the accelerator. The vehicle lurched forward, tires spinning in the loose sand before finding purchase. The skinwalker on the roof tumbled off, its shriek cut short as it disappeared from view. The headlights illuminated nothing but empty desert ahead, but in the distance, I could make out the faint glow of artificial light. The highway, civilization, safety. I drove recklessly, bouncing over rocks and scrub brush, the truck's suspension groaning in protest. In the rearview mirror, I could see the skinwalkers giving chase, their unnatural bodies allowing them to move with impossible speed. But they couldn't match the truck at full throttle. The throttle remained wide open. Gradually, the glowing eyes of the skinwalkers diminished to mere pinpricks in the rearview, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The glow on the horizon intensified, promising escape. I was closing in on the highway on salvation. Then, impossibly, there it was. The unmistakable silhouette against the night sky. The neon coyote of Coyote Fuel and Go. Its red outline flickering like a dying ember. It defied logic. I had been driving away from the station, not toward it. Yet there it stood, growing larger in my headlights. The pumps materialized from the shadows, followed by the store itself, its windows dark and vacant. I slammed on the brakes, the truck fishtailing to a jarring halt in the gravel lot. This couldn't be real. I had driven directly away from that cursed clearing, toward the beacon of the highway. There was absolutely no way I could have circled back to the station, unless the desert itself was conspiring against me, warping space to keep me ensnared. The desert doesn't forget, Hank Yazzie had warned, and it doesn't forgive. I sat paralyzed, the engine idling roughly, as the horrifying implications crashed down on me. If escape by driving away was impossible, what other options remained? The payphone inside the store began its shrill, insistent ringing, the sound piercing the silence, even from inside the truck. It was the same phone that had spoken to me in that drowning voice, the one that had warned me about the bone pumps. They're using you. The pumps aren't for gas. My gaze fell to the clay token clutched in my hand, turning it over to examine the strange symbols carved into its weathered surface. They were identical to the markings I had seen on the bone pumps in the clearing. Some kind of binding sigil, perhaps a focal point for the dark magic that kept the skinwalkers tethered to this desolate place. The payphone continued its relentless ringing, demanding my attention. Against my better judgment, I found myself opening the truck door, stepping out into the oppressive night. The air was unnaturally still, not even a whisper of wind to disturb the silence between the insistent rings. I approached the store cautiously, half expecting Hank Yazzie to materialize in the doorway, but the entrance remained dark and empty. The bell didn't jingle as I pushed the door open. It hung motionless, just as it had earlier that night. The payphone's ringing intensified as I stepped inside, echoing through the vacant store. The fluorescent lights flickered erratically overhead, casting jumping, distorted shadows across the worn linoleum floor. The shelves stood fully stocked, the refrigerators humming a monotonous tune. Everything appeared normal on the surface, yet nothing felt right. The air inside was heavy, suffocatingly warm, as if the store itself were breathing. I approached the payphone slowly, each step requiring a conscious effort. The receiver vibrated slightly with each ring, an object possessed of some unnatural life. I lifted it to my ear. "Hello!" Static crackled, then a voice, the same elderly female voice I'd heard before, speaking through what sounded like an ocean of water. "Throw it in the flames." "What?" I asked, confused. "The token. Hank Yazzie's token. Throw it in the flames, and the binding breaks." "Who are you?" I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. A pause, thick with static. Then, I was Hank Yazzie's wife. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The skinwalker in the clearing, the one that had dragged Hank Yazzie away, it had worn a woman's face, his wife's face. "You're one of them," I accused, my voice trembling. "I was human once," the voice replied, a hint of sorrow in its tone. "Before Hank Yazzie's grandfather sacrificed me to them, before I became the first keeper." "I don't understand," I said, my mind reeling. "The Yazzie family doesn't just tend the pumps, Miguel Reyes. They become them eventually. Hank Yazzie's time was ending. He needed a replacement, you." My grip tightened on the receiver. "Why are you helping me?" "Because 70 years is long enough." The voice grew fainter, swallowed by the increasing static. "Burn it all. Free us." The line went dead, leaving only the buzzing silence of the empty store. I stood frozen, the receiver still pressed to my ear, struggling to comprehend what I just heard. Hank Yazzie hadn't just been selecting a sacrifice. He'd been choosing his replacement, another keeper to tend the pumps, to feed the skinwalkers with the essence of unsuspecting travelers. And his wife, or what remained of her, wanted me to end it all. Throw it in the flames. I looked down at the clay token in my hand. If what the voice said was true, this object was the key to breaking whatever unholy bond tethered the skinwalkers to this place. But what flames? The desert night was cool and still, no fire in sight. Then I remembered my first instinct upon finding myself back at this forsaken station. Burn it all to the ground. I was a mechanic, Miguel Reyes. I knew how engines worked, how fuel systems operated, and I knew that beneath the concrete islands where the pumps stood, massive tanks held thousands of gallons of highly flammable gasoline. The plan formed in my mind with terrifying clarity. I returned to Hank Yazzi's truck and drove it directly to pump number 4, the one that had leaked the viscous black fluid, the one I'd been chained to in the clearing. I positioned the vehicle so that its gas tank was aligned with the pump, then retrieved the tire iron from the cab. Working quickly and deliberately, I used the iron to pry open the pump's maintenance panel. Inside was a chaotic tangle of wires and tubes, the modern disguise for something far older and more sinister. I could feel it now, a subtle vibration, a palpable wrongness that emanated from the pump's very core. Beneath the plastic and metal housing lay bone, ancient and hungry. I disconnected the safety shutoff valve, the mechanism that prevented gasoline from flowing when no one was actively pumping, then jammed the nozzle trigger with the gas cap from Hank Yazzi's truck, creating a continuous, uncontrolled flow. Gasoline began pouring onto the cracked concrete, spreading in a widening, shimmering pool around the base of the pump. I repeated the process with the other 3 pumps, working methodically despite the growing sense of urgency and dread. The skinwalkers would return soon. They would sense what I was doing, and they would not be pleased. When all 4 pumps were gushing gasoline, I retreated back to the store. The overwhelming smell of fuel burned my nostrils and brought tears to my eyes. I needed something to create a spark, something that would ignite the volatile gasoline from a safe distance. Behind the counter, I found Hank Yazzi's pack of cigarettes. Hank Yazzi's pack of cigarettes lay next to a book of matches, but striking a match and throwing it wouldn't afford me enough time to escape the impending blast. A delay was essential. My eyes landed on my wristwatch, an old-fashioned wind-up model with a robust metal case and band. The truck's key fob battery was far too small, but the watch, if I could engineer a short circuit between its battery and a metallic object, it might generate sufficient heat to ignite the gasoline fumes. I removed the watch and, using the tire iron, pried open its back, carefully extracting the diminutive battery. Scouring the register drawer, I discovered a paper clip, which I straightened. By bridging the positive and negative terminals of the battery with the clip, I could create a short circuit. The paper clip would rapidly heat up, eventually reaching a temperature high enough to ignite the gasoline-soaked paper towel I intended to wrap around it. A makeshift time bomb, granting me perhaps 30 seconds to reach safety. I positioned the device at the edge of the expanding pool of gasoline, ensuring the paper towel was thoroughly saturated. Then stood, the clay token gripped tightly in my hand. "Throw it in the flames," the voice had commanded. Not yet. First, I needed flames. I sprinted back to the truck, started the engine, and reversed away from the pumps, tires protesting with a squeal on the slick concrete. I didn't cease until I reached the highway, strategically positioning the vehicle for a rapid departure. From this vantage point, I could survey the entire station. The 4 pumps spewing gasoline, the store with its flickering lights, the neon coyote sign casting its eerie red glow over everything. It possessed an almost serene quality, a luminous haven amidst the desert's profound darkness. Then the makeshift bomb detonated. The flash erupted first, a blue-white blaze that momentarily transformed night into day, followed by the sound, a deep, resonant whump that vibrated in my chest more than reached my ears. The gasoline ignited instantly, flames surging along the concrete in 4 directions simultaneously, converging upon the pumps. For a fleeting moment, nothing further occurred. The pumps burned fiercely, enveloped in orange flames that propelled thick black smoke spiraling into the night sky. Then pump number 4 exploded, the force of the blast knocking me against the truck, the concussion wave hitting like a physical blow. An intense wave of heat washed over me, singeing my eyebrows. Debris rained down, chunks of concrete, twisted metal, fragments of what looked like bone. The remaining pumps followed in quick succession, each explosion more violent than the last. The underground tanks ignited, transforming the entire station into a roaring inferno. The store's windows shattered outward, glass shards glittering like diamonds as they reflected the firelight. The roof caved inward, consumed by the insatiable flames. As I witnessed the destruction, a sound ascended above the roar of the fire. A chorus of howls permeated with rage and agony. Dark shapes materialized at the periphery of the firelight, pacing restlessly but either unable or unwilling to approach the flames. Skinwalkers, dozens of them, their yellow eyes reflecting the fire like malevolent stars. The clay token in my hand grew hot, vibrating with the same frequency as the howls. I understood then. This object was their anchor, the physical embodiment of whatever tethered them to this place, and I held their fate in my palm. "Throw it in the flames," the voice had urged. I stepped forward, feeling the intense heat of the fire searing my face. The skinwalkers perceived my intent. Their howls intensified to a fevered pitch, and several broke from the pack, surging toward me with unnatural speed. I drew back my arm and hurled the token with all my might. It arced through the smoke-filled air, spinning end over end before vanishing into the heart of the inferno. For a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then the fire underwent a transformation, the flames shifting from orange to blue-white, rising in a perfect column that pierced the night sky. The heat intensified, becoming almost unbearable even from my position by the highway. The skinwalkers screamed, no longer howls, but human screams of agony and release. Their bodies began to disintegrate, flesh and bone turning to ash that swirled upward in the superheated air. One by one, the yellow eyes winked out until only the fire remained, burning with an unnatural intensity. I stumbled back to the truck, my lungs burning from smoke and exertion. As I pulled onto the highway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The pillar of fire illuminated the desert for miles, a beacon visible to anyone within 50 miles. By morning, nothing would remain of coyote fuel and go but a scorched foundation and unanswerable questions. I drove east, away from the fire, away from the skinwalkers, away from Hank Yazzie and his terrible legacy. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the night began to dissipate, leaving me trembling and nauseated. Cuts and burns I hadn't even registered stung with sudden intensity. My wrists were raw where the chains had bound them, but I was alive. I had escaped, and I had put an end to whatever ancient horror had been unfolding at Coyote Fuel and Go for generations. 1 week later, Danny was released from rehab, clear-eyed and sober for the first time in years. I told him a version of the truth, that there had been an accident at the station, that I'd barely escaped the fire, that I needed a fresh start somewhere far from the desert. We drove west on Interstate 10, the car packed with everything we owned, which wasn't much. California seemed as good a destination as any, a place where the past couldn't follow us, where the desert's long memory couldn't reach. Danny fiddled with the radio as we crossed the state line, finally settling on a station playing Navajo folk music. The melody was hauntingly familiar, the same rhythm as track 3, the chant that had driven back the black fluid from the pumps. But this version was peaceful. As the Navajo folk music filled the car, Danny's voice, clear and untroubled, joined in with the singer on the radio. In the rearview mirror, the vast expanse of the desert, the scene of so much horror, receded behind us, shrinking into the distance with every mile. For the first time in years, I didn't look back, didn't feel the pull of the past, the weight of what we'd left behind in that desolate landscape.